Okay, you guys, I am really excited. I know I always say I'm excited to start these episodes, but I really am. And I have a friend today joining me, Debbie Whitehead, and she is going to talk to us about all things codependency. What is it? What is it not? What are we all worried about? Is it being overused? How do we deal with it and still have nurturing relationships? You know that on this episode series, I've been talking so much about building friendships and being vulnerable and being able to show up honest. And I know for me that this is something that I can easily get kind of tripped up in, and I'm worried about it. Am I being codependent, or is this a healthy connection, or is it, right? Am I too worried or not worried enough? All of the things. So Debbie, we need your help. We're so excited to have you as with your expertise here. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kylie. I know it's taken us a while to connect just because of our schedules or technology or weather, things like that. But thank you for having me. My name is Debbie Whitehead. I have been a therapist, counselor for over 30 years now, which is like unbelievable to me. I have a private practice in Plano, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas in a suburb. All my clients are online. So if anyone needs counseling or therapy, you live in Texas, feel free to DM me or send me an email. Go to my website, debbiewhitehead.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. But thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yes.
I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy to have you. And especially to have like your expertise. I'm sure that you have had a client or two and have studied about codependency. And I don't know if you want to share any of your personal life story with us. You can, of just what do we need to know? Like, tell us, what is it not? Help us out.
Well, when sometimes I get, it's a confusing term, right? You're like, wait, what is codependency? Who's the codependent? What is the codependent? Like, what is, like, I always think meaning like unity, like, so it involves other people, or it involves at least one person, right?
Yes.
So, I do have a lot of clients that'll say, hey, do you think I'm codependent? Like, and so we'll like unpack it today. This is what we're here for. So, I have some ideas and things to bring up and talk about, but the term codependency wasn't used until about the 70s. I did find one resource that mentioned maybe the 50s, but basically Alcoholics Anonymous needed a term to help families that they were working with. And that's where the term came up. There's a lady, Melody Beatty. She has said to be like to come up with it, that she came up with the term. Oh, wow. So like, I don't know, it's kind of, a little unclear where it first came up, but, and I think the term codependent is like really used very loosely nowadays. I feel like it's like, I think you and I were talking before, it's like the word narcissism. Like, it's so like, we're all kind of paranoid. Am I a narcissist? Is my husband a narcissist? Is my best friend a narcissist? Like, what? And so I don't particularly give diagnoses with my clients. And I know that can frustrate them sometimes because we want a label that we can like smack on ourselves, right? And I don't want that. I want people to be really fluid and to know that they can change. And so I don't like to give a diagnosis. But it's good if you're using insurance, which I don't take insurance, unfortunately. But that's why, and the word codependent is not in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is the manual that psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, that we use to give to insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. So, which I don't use. So I don't think about my clients in terms of diagnoses or defining them. So sometimes it surprises me and I'm like, what's codependency? And basically what codependency is say, I'll use an example. Say your husband has like a drinking problem or a drug abuse problem, and you would be the codependent as the wife, where he stays in that state, or he has those tendencies. We almost enable them to stay there. We don't, like, I always say if my husband in reality struggled with that, I'd be like, oh heck no, we're not going there. I don't need that stress,
Yeah.
right? And so I would stand up to him and get him to change. And I know that a lot of wives don't feel like they have that kind of power or they have that relationship with their spouse to be that strong and to expect their husband to change. So that's what I have found with codependent. I was working with a couple and I thought, this husband has some codependency issues. Like he drinks a lot. I don't know that I would call him an alcoholic. I don't know
Yeah.
if he fits under that definition, but he definitely has some addictions as far as alcohol use, drug abuse, things like that. So does that help? Does that explain?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great start to the conversation for sure. I have lots of questions already,
Okay.
so it's
Okay.
a good
Go for it.
starter. So I think
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I hear you saying and giving voice to that I think is so valuable is that just realizing that, especially it's our day and age for sure. I don't know how long it's been going, but we are so desiring the rules, a wall, if you might say, with beyond the walls, right? Like there's these clear cut black and white boundaries. I am this, I am not. Like there's something about our human nature that I think we find safety in those black and whites.
Yeah.
And it's so
Definitely
hard to be in the gray area. And unfortunately, so much of life is gray, right? So I think hearing that,
which I didn't realize until I was a lot older in life. I'm 60 years old now, and I didn't realize the gray. I always saw life very black and white until I started to counsel, and then I was like, wait, we're not all in either black or white. Like there is a lot of gray area, and so I use that with my clients as just give yourself permission to be, just to exist. Be in the present moment. Just be in this time. And it takes a lot of work to get there.
It does.
So,
and as we mature, right? Like I think that's where I always talk a lot of like, we have to like reassess constantly because what was true, healthy or unhealthy for us at one point, it may or may not be healthy or unhealthy anymore, right?
That's so true. That's so true. We go through different seasons in our life. I heard someone say the other day that they're married to different versions of their wife. And I went, that's really wise because I know I've been married for almost 30 years, I think. 1987. I got married. So like, is that 37 years? But, like I've changed and I've evolved and I've healed and I've worked on myself. So I could see how my husband could say that too.
Yeah. So it's so valuable to hear that. And I love the idea that where you're even saying like how something got started, it morphs over time. So even just, and I think what I heard in your brief sharing also was just being able to also lower the significance of the label that so much of which I think can cause frustration. This is like a side tangent on the medical profession, right? Between like, is our health holistic? Like our doctors are limited by policies and procedures and red tape and money. And like, there's so many variables at play in each of these situations. I think ultimately my takeaway is I start to want to feel overwhelmed, but really what I offer you guys today is to just lower the significance, right? Like
I love that.
It doesn't have to be like the biggest priority or some monster coming out to get you, just something to put on the back burner, be aware of to keep it, all of it in its proper place. So
definitely.
With that being said, I would love to because you gave us an example. So I would like to take a few minutes. We weren't necessarily planning to talk about alcoholism or that within that kind of a context and that kind of circumstances when it comes to codependency. Like, what do you mean literally? Like if your husband started having a drinking issue or whatever, like what would you literally do? Like, are you suggesting we pack up and leave the house? We just give them time? Like at what point on that gray scale do we go from being healthy, supportive, understanding, compassionate to then enabling?
Definitely. Yeah, I would ask if that happened to me. I would say, babe, we need to sit down and talk. Like, can we have like a few minutes after dinner maybe and talk? And very gently, very lovingly, I would just say, hey, I've noticed recently that you've been drinking more, or maybe you've been taking your Adderall. My husband doesn't take Adderall, but if he did, like, I feel like maybe you're abusing those things. Is there something going on with you? That's my approach. I mean, and I'm a counselor, so I've worked, professionally with people. Um, Especially if it was someone that I was close to, like my husband, and his behavior affected me or our children. My kids are both adults; they're not home now. But if they were growing up and that was his struggle, I would definitely, in the most nurturing, loving way from me, is to sit down and to ask him, "How are you? What's going on? I've noticed lately your behavior, or you're relying on this more. Are you okay? Are you like, is something going on?" And if he's like, yeah, something's going on, then my next step would be, how can we help you?
Yeah.
Like, are you willing to go get help? And I think I think to me, humility is so huge in a marriage, or any relationship really, in how willing are you to get help and to change.
Yeah.
And if he's like, yes, I need help, I want help, then let's go to Alcoholics Anonymous, or let's go to a counselor together. And I may even say, I'll go with you. I like people doing their work first and then letting the spouse come in. But sometimes that's not good for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, they need to come in together at the onset. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I would approach it,
Yeah.
is just say, hey, I'm concerned for you. I care about the quality of your life, and honestly, it affects me. It impacts me.
Yeah.
How you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing to do at first, because as wives, or if it's the wife that is struggling with that, and the husband approaches, I think that's so loving. Like, wow, the person who I love and feel safe with the most is asking me to get help. Like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully most of us do. But
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, just to repeat back what I heard you say, was, well, what you didn't say was, hey, I think you didn't come in attacking or accusing of, like, this is a problem, I see you
yeah,
having a problem, like, clearly there, like, there's no, you didn't come in with even fear, or even like, I'm
yeah, all
afraid.
guns ablazing.
Yeah, no guns are blazing, and it
Yeah,
wasn't even like, I'm afraid. But the question first was, are you okay? Here's something, like, just an open-ended
yeah.
conversation that's curious about how they're experiencing life. It really isn't even about
Yeah.
the drink.
Like, did something happen at work that you haven't talked about? Like, what's bothering you? Are you insecure about something in our relationship, or like your mom and dad? Like, what's going on? Like, how are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to ask that a lot more, just in life, with people we
Yeah.
love.
So I guess I would imagine the harder parts go into, like, if you, I mean, one, I'm sure so many of us start that conversation in the non-helpful way and start an attack and start a fight and just
Hmm.
start then having a whole bunch of conflict and shut down and hurt feelings. And that's an episode for another day. But let's say we do it nicely and lovingly, and the other person doesn't, they don't handle it well. They don't want to talk about it. They're in denial it's a problem. Or even if we come in
Hmm.
loving and they respond with rage or frustration or just being shut down, like they're not interested in talking, I guess, how does that then show up? Like, what's our step to do then?
I would pray. Like, me personally, I would get on my knees by my bed and I would pray, and I would ask God to work in his heart.
Mm,
Because I think sometimes, and that's the thing with codependent, being a codependent, is I want to control that person, right? Like, I want, like, they're impacting me in a negative way, and I don't like that. That's usually a good sign that maybe you're
yeah.
codependent, is when you feel like I need to cross their boundary. Because I can't change anyone. We each change on our own time when we're
Yeah.
ready, and I know that about people. So I think that would be a good thing to help people see, is
Yeah.
that you can't necessarily change someone's behavior or even their attitude, but you can help them
Yeah.
get there. And sometimes it takes time. Like, I have had things in my marriage where it just took time, maybe months, before my husband, before it clicked. I always use the example. It's like when a dog, you're talking to a puppy and he turns his head to look at you, and
Yeah.
you know when he understands and when he's going to obey, right? So I use that a lot. Like I know when my husband understands what I'm saying and when to take me serious.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of knowing
Yeah.
who you're involved with
Yeah.
too. Because a codependent person would be like, oh, you don't need to change. And you would continue your habits to keep them in that same place. And so, but if you're not a codependent, it would frustrate you. I think that's a good way to know.
Yeah.
Codependents really like, I think one of the things I learned when I studied codependency is codependent people are really awesome people. They're usually helpers, they're empaths, they're very sensitive people who care a lot about other people, but they don't allow that person to change on their own. They want to change them. They want to be the rescuers. And so I always say, if you're codependent, like you're usually, when I see it, is like women my age that have lived their life for other people, maybe their kids, maybe their husband, and they don't know what they like. Like if I say, hey, what's your favorite movie? Or what's your favorite type of food? They look at me like they're like dumbfounded. Like I have no idea. So I have them journal prompt the question, who am I? I have them journal prompt that. And I want them to write, they can list it or they can write it in sentence form, what they like, who they are, what is their favorite color.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we don't take care of ourselves because we're so enmeshed in helping people change, and it keeps them in the habit of whatever they're consumed by, the alcohol, the drugs. And so we tend to use it like my adult children have told me before, Mom, you're codependent. Like we need boundaries. And that's where the word boundary comes in. I love Terry Cole's Boundary Boss. This is a great resource with a lot of practical examples, and it's amazing. It's an easy read, but it's very deep. And I think a codependent person doesn't have good boundaries. And so my kids have said, Mom, you're too codependent. Like, and they'll set their boundaries and they communicate how much they want me involved in their life, or how much input do they want, right? So, that's good. That's healthy. That's a very healthy relationship. And I have, family members or friends that say, I don't like when my kids set boundaries. And I'll come back with, but that's really good for them because they know themselves well enough to know what they can handle, what is good for them, what's healthy for them, and things like that. So I think it's good. I think boundaries are amazing if you communicate them in a clear way.
Yeah. Okay. Those were really helpful. So if we transitioned away from, I guess, because maybe the majority of us, then if we're quote unquote misapplying codependency or over applying it, and we really kind of transition, like, how does it show up in the average marriage? I think of, especially then parenting, like I still have teens, your kids are now grown adults, right? Like,
yeah,
or even just our
they're out of the house on their own.
Yeah, like the extended family or friendships. Like, so maybe describe to us a little bit more of like how would codependency show up more in those relationships? I think in what you were describing was kind of this like not owning our own feelings and wants and needs. Would that be a way to describe it? Is it an enmeshment?
Definitely. Yeah, I like the word enmeshed because to me, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. We're like enmeshed with each other. I think that's a good, we're like overstepping our boundary. Okay. Like that's how I see it, is when I do that and my kids or my best friend or someone is like enough, like back off a little bit, then I know, okay, I need to give them space. And so I see codependency as we don't give people the space to help themselves. Like we can help people. Helping is one thing, but we don't need to do, like, I don't need to take care of my kids, like how I would call it serving them growing up. Like I can have a different relationship with them. Like my daughter is here for a few days and she made her own breakfast this morning. I don't have to wake up early and make my kids breakfast anymore. Like they have that down, right?
Yeah.
And so if I have time and I want to serve them, that's one thing, but I don't need to rescue them.
Mm,
That's also how that would be a good word. I don't need to rescue them, or
yeah.
I don't need to take care of them. I can love them and pamper them and serve them if I want. That's my choice. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good sign is if I'm feeling embittered in a relationship, I need to ask myself, why am I feeling that? Am I doing too much for them?
Mm,
Or, you know, am I what does my relationship with them look
yeah.
like?
Yeah.
Do they feel like they can breathe and things like that? And so a codependent person, it's almost like a smothering, like we smother the people we love
Yeah.
and we don't give them space to figure out what their convictions are or
Mm,
what they are wanting or needing at that time. I think it's really good to ask, what do you need right now? How can I help you?
yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Those are helpful.
does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is
it
that clear?
does. Yeah. Well, and so how does I guess another question that I'm thinking about now is when I think unfortunately the other part I think of our society, right? Like and you had mentioned it in the narcissist, right? Like we're constantly on this high alert looking for the narcissist
Mm-hmm.
and looking for the codependency as if like what if it's there? I feel like the
Yeah.
challenge, it's almost in our cancel culture, right, where then like the answer means I must get divorced, there must be a serious separation, right? But when we lower that significance, like I guess how what would you share to the woman who might be, let's say it's not alcoholism, let's say it's even just emotional intimacy, right? Or their ability to share with their spouse emotionally and a give and a take. What are like healthy ways, or what would be red flags for us, I guess, even to know like to just start taking more ownership about what really is about us, because as the wives, as the server, as
Mm-hmm.
the empath, as the helper, it's so easy for us to take on more than we're supposed to, which I hear what you're saying, and sort of kind of transitions into that controlling nature where like I'm going to fix this and
Yeah,
control you. Talk to us about
definitely.
that.
I think if you're feeling well, I think having a low self-esteem
Mm,
could really what is the word, habituate or really keep that vicious cycle in play. And so I think when we work on ourselves individually, and like I'm working, like one of my words for this year is hope, and my second word is renewal, hope and renewal,
mm,
because I really want to grow in things that I'm afraid of. Like I want this to be the year that I don't give in to my fear.
mm, mm.
And so that means using my voice more, speaking up, speaking louder, maybe putting my shoulders back a little bit more, you know, holding myself up through letting my spine hold me up straighter. Like I want to be confident. I want to really grow in that. And a lot of that stems from childhood trauma for me. And so I think healing that, I really spent a lot of time last year healing my own trauma. And that's what I would encourage us all to do. Like that's always my number one tip is we have to heal ourselves first. And so something that keeps us in that cycle of being a codependent, because it's not usually just one relationship that we have that's codependent. Like that's our tendency to be with other relationships,
Yeah.
right? And so there are a lot of people that are like, I don't need you to have that kind of relationship with me. That doesn't make me feel good. That doesn't work for me. But then you'll find those people who you literally can lose sight of who you are. And I've found that it's usually, especially in women, it's with a lower self-esteem.
Mm,
And so if you work on your identity, your confidence, like who you are as an individual, it's going to help you to be stronger, and you won't like look for those relationships and attract
yeah.
them, because I believe we attract who we are, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to attract a codependent relationship, and so I'll work on me. And so I think awareness is really, really huge.
Yeah.
Like it's like constantly walking around being aware of, why did I say that? Why did I
Mhm.
do that? Like being aware of our behavior. I teach TFA, for thoughts, feelings, actions.
Mhm.
And so I want my clients to be almost aware at any moment of the day what they're thinking and
Yeah.
feeling, and be able to tell me verbally what it is that they're feeling or thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think low self-esteem
Yeah.
um, is an indicator of, like, usually the people that are codependent have a lower
Yeah.
self-esteem. And so it's almost breaking away from that and finding, that's why I like the journal prompt. Who am I?
Yeah.
And honestly, so many people have such a hard time with that question.
Yeah.
My younger clients too, I'll go, who are you? And they look at me like, what do you mean, who am I? And I'm like, tell me about yourself. Like, who are you? Not just your job, like what you
Yeah.
do. Like, who are you as a person? What's your favorite animal? What do you think of when you think of a horse? What word comes to your mind? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, what makes you tick?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to lose sight of that when we're in relationships. I don't want us to lose sight of who we are. It's really important that we know our identity and we have a healthy identity. I've had to work on a lot of like faulty beliefs from things I was told when I was a little girl. Like, that wasn't very loving for that adult to tell me that, or
Mm-hmm.
for my dad to tell me that. And so I have to heal that part of me, right? Do inner child work or whatever to
Yeah.
heal. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
yeah, I think it's important.
yeah. So I guess I hear from you if that might be a first place to even start to look. If you're concerned that maybe you're
Mm-hmm.
codependent or you're overly enmeshed, you're kind of enmeshed with a particular relationship.
Mm-hmm.
First, take a look at yourself and just see how is your own confidence? How well do you know yourself?
Yeah,
Are you able to
definitely.
stand alone as a valuable person? As opposed to I'm more
Definitely.
valuable because of this status or this relationship. If my kids are doing well, then I'm doing well. Right. And I wonder to
Mm-hmm.
maybe speak to parents of teen moms for a minute, because I feel like it's such a
Okay.
natural path that is so
Yeah,
uncomfortable, right? Like you go through all of these stages, your kids need you for everything. You may or may not enjoy that.
definitely.
So those that enjoy it more probably have an even harder time. But there's a natural, appropriate age
Mm-hmm.
stage, right? Whereas a teen, they're trying to become their own independent person. And sometimes like
Definitely.
moms are a little bit like they're not as ready as the kids are, right? It's a painful separation,
Definitely.
right?
It's an adjustment. No, it took me, I know my kids are 30 and 20, 31 and 29, I
Okay.
think. And it's like an adjustment. I always tell them, be patient with me. Remember how I served you and loved you all your
Yes.
life. Be patient with me. Give me the same courtesy that I gave you growing up. And they're like, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But, because we don't change fast enough as parents for our kids. I can tell you
Mhm.
that. Like, any child or teen that I've worked with in my counseling practice, they're like, my parent doesn't get it. They don't understand me. And I'm like, it's up to you to teach your parent to love you and to help you. So yeah, yeah. It takes time, but it's different seasons, right? That we're in. Good questions, Kylie. Good questions.
Okay, yeah. So that phase
I think,
is like
yeah,
so
I think so.
uncomfortable as a mom, right? And so I think what I'm hearing from you as well in that then is just remembering that that is a
Yeah,
natural
yeah,
part of the day. Would you encourage then to just start, if we're having a really hard time with that transition, that's I guess even the place to keep looking is to just getting your own life, just making sure nurturing, taking baby steps, planning to like have your own life, your own identity that's not, oh, I'm so and so's wife, or this is my profession, I'm their mom, having purpose.
definitely. Yeah, and our kids want that for us too. Like, my kids will tell me, like, my daughter, we were watching a show last night with my husband and my daughter, and something came on the show, and she said, it was about a mom. I can't remember. Anyways, and she said, Mom, I would want, oh, it was a mom who made a decision. She had an adult daughter, and she made a decision to leave her daughter to go pursue a
Mm,
relationship just for a time being. And she goes, Mom, I would want you to live your life. Like, I want you and Daddy to go. I don't
yeah,
want to worry about you guys as you get older. Like, I want you to go and live your life. Like, you've done everything for
yeah,
me. Like, you've given me a great foundation. Like, I have that. I'm secure in that. I need you to go live your life
Yes.
and let me be. That's what I hear her saying is, let me be, let me live my life like you got to go lead your
Yes. And
life.
it's not a rejection, right? Like, so if we're respecting, right? Like mutual respect, I suppose, and love and care doesn't mean, I guess, even responsibility. Like,
Yeah,
we're not responsible for each other, but we're
definitely.
connected. So how do we have a healthy connection without it
Yeah.
being controlling or mandatory, I guess? Like, would that be a key word as a red flag for somebody when you're
Yeah.
feeling like I have to have this in order to have a good relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where, like you said, like when you have a healthy relationship, it's built on trust and respect, and you have a great foundation. You can ask those questions. Like, do you, like, maybe you could say, hey, I don't want to be codependent, or I don't want us to be enmeshed in an unhealthy way. Like, my daughter, like, works with my husband.
Mhm.
Like, they have a relationship, but I think at times she has to go,
Yeah.
Dad, like, I need a little time out. I need space. And so it's listening to them and respecting their voice. That's how I see it as parents with children. Like, we have to give them the same respect that we want them to give us. And so our kids are just little for such a short time. It's so sad. I know. I loved being a mom. I got
Mm,
to raise my kids. I put my practice on hold. Like, I kind of pushed it to the side so I
yeah.
could be with them. And that was the happiest I ever
Yeah.
was. But that can't be my identity, or like, I can't
Yeah.
follow them through life and make decisions for them.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so that makes me think of mom guilt. Okay, so what, like, I would imagine, can that sort of get um
Mm-hmm.
inappropriately enmeshed, right? Because it makes me think of, like, I've always stayed at home with my kids. And so me taking on being a life coach and having this podcast and having a business is very different for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also very different for my kids, and especially my second born. So my firstborn, she is extremely independent. She is like, let me run without you. I don't need you for anything. So, but my second one is like, I want to do everything with you. So to you know,
Mm-hmm.
the mom, like, loving that part, I can easily give too much then. I can find, I want to have an appropriate attachment to that second one that does not become codependent. And so I
Yeah.
would imagine, so I think it's a good thing that what I did and what I chose to do with the quote unquote mom guilt, because when I started this business, I'm like, I can also, they are old enough to start taking on some of their own responsibilities. Like, I don't have to do everything for you. And it's a transition for both of us. And so when my son comes back at me and says things like, I wish you weren't working, or why can't you, like, I miss you, or all of these things, I'm like, okay, we're still having quality time. Like, and I'm really not even, now that we were homeschooling, so that was harder for sure. But now my kids are gone most of the day. So I do my working during
Mm-hmm.
the daytime while they're at school. I am totally available in the afternoon. Like, I know mentally, emotionally, time wise, that they are getting time, right? And so I'm choosing in those moments to hear it, in those moments when he does share it. I'm like, one, be encouraged. He wants to be with me. That's awesome. Two, it's appropriate for me to have some boundaries. Like, I am not here at your beck and call, but helping him kind of navigate that, of like, it's also okay for you to detach from me,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah.
So it just made me think of, like, in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, sometimes that mom guilt where then we're feeling bad because of somebody else's
Mm-hmm.
feelings. And so I guess maybe talk to me through that, if that would be a good example of a healthy, like, just you're acknowledging, like, okay, there's an uncomfortable emotion. It doesn't make us wrong, or we need to stop doing something. And I think it's hard for us to not follow through
Mm-hmm.
doing something just because somebody else is unhappy, or they don't like it, or they're uncomfortable.
Because I think that habit could create codependency, because we're trying to please. And that's another thing. It's usually people that are very pleasing, that want to make everybody around them happy. And, maybe because they were the
Yeah.
peacemaker trauma in their family when they were little. So they become an adult and they still have that tendency, right? Um, I don't think there's room for mom guilt. I mean, we can feel guilty because we work, but I mean, some people
Yeah.
have to work, like they have to, or they have to. I just think, why have mom guilt? Like, and a good question to ask yourself is, will I regret this in 10 years? If he comes back to you and says, Mom, I didn't get this
Yeah.
need met, like, are you going to feel guilty or have regret that you didn't do that? I think that helps me make decisions, because I'll say, no, like, I'm good. Like, I can, like, I became a certified personal trainer. I think I was maybe 50. Like, and my son and I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to go to get some school. I'm going to go to a 3-day program. I want to train for this. I want to get licensed. As a personal trainer, and that's part of my 8 elements
Yeah.
of wellness that I teach my clients. Is, I think the physical part of us is, it's just as important as the mental health part, right? And so I told my kids what I was doing, and they were so happy for me. They left me little study notes, and like, they were my greatest cheerleaders. But I remember thinking,
Yeah.
am I going to regret like doing these, like not giving them their like undivided attention? And I was like, no, it's gonna, like, I'm gonna show them, hey, your mom can be a mom, can be a wife, and can
Yeah.
run her own
Yeah.
business, and can be, working with other people. Like, I wanted them to see me doing those things. And I've seen that really be fruitful in their lives as adults. Like, they got that from me. Like, I'll tell myself, like, they saw me do that when they were little, so now they're doing that. They have that freedom.
Yeah.
So I would ask yourself,
Yeah.
is your mom guilt because you're going to have a regret?
Yeah.
I try to live life with no regrets, or as minimal regrets as possible, because I don't want that guilt, right?
Mm.
And so I think maybe what I heard you say with your son is, I would
Yeah.
just ask him, what do you want more of? Like,
Yeah.
what, because I feel like he's trying to tell you something. So what is it that he's trying to tell you? And just ask him a couple
Yeah.
questions to see if there's a need. Like, he may say, gosh, I would just like for you to take me to go get ice cream once a week. Like, maybe he feels like because you're doing A, B, or C, you're not going to do these things with
Yeah.
him.
I love
And maybe
that.
find out what is it that he wants more of, or that he feels like he's missing. So maybe just asking him enough
Yeah.
questions to dig a little bit more into, to find out what is it that what are you wanting from mommy? Or maybe asking him, what do you want our relationship to look like?
Yeah.
Like, because he might have a visual of
Yeah.
something that he's.
I love that. Yeah. And I think combining those two things, I love the taking in our, would you have regret if you don't? Either way, right? Because I think I always like to think of it as like the opportunity cost. And
Mm-hmm,
when you
mm-hmm,
look at something as just the, what is the opportunity, right? When there's not all of these emotions, there's not this high significance and pressure. It's kind of just the facts. Like, okay, I can either do this or I
mm-hmm.
don't do this. What would life look like? And it's kind of like the pros and cons of do or don't. And so then I'm like, okay, well, what would the cost be to my children if I do or don't do this? Like, what would it cost him
Yeah,
if I were
yeah,
to not, because he had this emotional, eh, is it a day or is
yeah.
it really a character of our dynamic that needs addressed? Or was it just a bad moment in a bad day? Right?
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. It could have just been a moment that he was having, or like maybe he felt fear, like, oh, my mom's not going to be around too much. Like, I think that our number one job as
Mm,
parents, I told my daughter that this morning, is that
mm,
our number one job as parents is to keep our children alive until they can take care of themselves and keep themselves alive.
yeah.
So I was like, okay, I have one job, and then I have to, of course, meet their basic needs: food, shelter, clothing,
Yeah.
make sure they're healthy. Like, then we can stack on those things. But if
Yes.
their basic
And
needs are
hopefully,
met,
I always feel like if I'm keeping, and my goal is to keep an open door so that at some point when they're old enough, when they have their own homes, we can talk about life, right? Or we can work on how can we make it better? How can we improve on it? Where are we trying to go with it? But
mm-hmm.
yeah, how do we really assess what is about me and what is about them? I think because I
I
feel
love
like
that.
these last 2 years have been a really challenging time for my daughter. I mean, so it's been a challenging time for me, right? Like the people that are around me are going through a lot of transition and challenges. And so I'm kind of, I'm being
Mm-hmm.
forced sort of, right? Like because you're around other
Mm-hmm.
people, it's not about me, but it's impacting me. And I'm either adding or taking away. And so then I have to do things that are about me and taking care of myself and being really clear, like, boy, how do I be strong enough to even be in a support role?
Mm-hmm.
Am I in a position to be supportive? Like, what can I handle? What can they handle? And I feel like what I've been thinking and praying about most this last year is just trying to figure out like what would be
Mm-hmm.
honoring to me and to them, and figuring out, just trying to keep that separation where I don't know if you had said it on this episode or if we were talking before we pressed record, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of that, like the idea of like, boy, I need to know how my kids are doing and then I'll know how I'm doing today, right? Like who's coming down the stairs, and I think of that like as the alcoholic, or in movies. I feel like that's kind of the depiction, like, I don't know, are we going to have a good day or not? Is that kind of a good sign for us that we're too codependent if we're waiting for
Mm-hmm.
others to tell us what we can do and how we can do it and how we move
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah. I think it's important to be
Yeah.
our own person, like to be like, I know I mentioned confidence, like to be self-confident, to have a good, healthy identity, and to like, we have to be able to live life on our own. I know that's something that was important for me. Was my husband, I've always seen him as like the breadwinner, and he takes care of us financially, and he's blessed our
Mm,
lives a lot. And a few years ago I was like, but I need to know that I could take care of myself too. And so I had that conversation with my
yeah.
husband, and he was like, okay, I see where that comes from, because my mom like always
Mhm.
worked full time, and she wasn't home a lot. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like she met my emotional needs. She was not a very warm, like loving, communicative person. And so I've healed that part of me, but
Mhm.
um, I don't want to be that to my kids, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to repeat how she was with me with my kids, which is a tendency for us to all just repeat how our childhood was, whether it was healthy or traumatic. And so I have to
Yeah.
be willing to look at my life and heal those parts of me that I
Yeah.
could like spew onto other people. And so I think the codependent has a lot of work to do on themselves. And
Yeah.
so, um, it's really important to be our own individual and to know I could. And so when I shared that with my husband, he was like, okay, like you don't have to to him, he thought I was carrying stress that I didn't need. And I was like, no, it actually would help my confidence to know that I could like support myself and care for myself or meet my own needs. And so I did that. I spent a couple years just building, my account or whatever, and really working on that goal, and it was so like affirming to me. I was like, I did it. And so it was, yeah, I think sometimes we need little challenges like that, or like just a little test to make sure we're still kicking, and we're still we're thriving and living life, and going after the things that are important to us. So, because I think a lot of times we make decisions, like you said, based on how other people feel. And that a codependent does that. Like, we're not happy if our spouse isn't happy or our kids aren't happy. And I've been there where other people's moods have affected me. And I think there is, like, that's normal. That's normal life. Like, we're going to be affected by other people. But, um,
Yeah.
we want to be healthy. We want to be mature and healthy. So,
Yes.
yeah. I think sometimes we take things out on our kids that we haven't
Mhm.
healed from our childhood.
Yeah.
And so that's when I think it can be dangerous or unhealthy.
Um, so you've given us such great tools so far, right? Of being able to ask ourselves first, like, are we insecure? Do we know ourselves, right? Of really keep owning our own individuality. What would be your suggestion or recommendation as we're trying
Mm-hmm.
to, especially with your last part that you said, like, well, we don't want to put our unhealed trauma on our kids or take it out on our spouses. So what would be like a question that we would ask ourselves in that moment to kind of know, like, gosh, is this my problem, or is this
Mm-hmm.
about you?
I think if we have a memory, like maybe ask ourselves, like, I think that's a good question. I think awareness is so crucial in life, like being aware. Like I've worked with people that have no idea what they think or what they feel in any given moment. And so I try to teach them to work with emotions or to be aware, like to be the fly on the wall, like to be aware of what they're thinking and what they're feeling. That's how I teach it. Like I think awareness is really huge. So if they're aware of where they're coming from and why they have certain actions, or like my son growing up, he would be like, "Mom, you're passive aggressive." And so I asked him one day, what is
Yeah.
mommy doing that frustrates you, that makes you tell me that I'm passive aggressive?
Yeah.
Because obviously it wasn't a good thing for him, right? And so I thought, wow, he's really wise. Like he's
Yeah.
got that clinical turn down that I had to look up. I wasn't even sure. I was like, Google define passive aggressive. And I
Mm,
realized, oh, okay. And then I remember telling him one day, you're right. Mommy is passive aggressive. I need
yeah.
to be more direct in what I ask you.
Mm,
Um, because he felt like I was beating around the bush. Like he knew
yeah.
that's not what you really wanted to
Wow.
say. And I go, you're right. You're right. I need to be more direct in how I communicate with you. And so I realized that that's how I was treated growing up. My mom she didn't communicate what she wanted very clearly. She would slam cabinet
Mm,
doors. She'd be in the kitchen and like things would be really
mm,
loud. And I was like, okay, my mom's mad. But she wouldn't say, yeah, what you just did really
yeah.
upset me. Like she
Um,
wouldn't communicate to me that way. And that's really like our
yeah.
kids need us to communicate clearly to them. And so, yeah, I appreciated my son. Like he helped me
Mm,
see something that was still a trauma from, because how my mom reacted was very
yeah.
traumatic for me as a kid. And I realized, oh, I brought that into my
Yeah.
adulthood
Yeah.
with my parenting, and I need to stop that. So I had to own it and take responsibility for it and change it. And ask him later, is mommy doing a better job? Am I still passive aggressive? And I think at one point I got the "you're okay, mom" thumbs up.
I think we're just so quick to be shut down and to always make it either mean like we're loved or we're not loved. And I think that's something that I've been wrestling with,
Mm-hmm.
of just how to even communicate, like of what I want to stand for on this
Yeah.
platform and my messaging. And if what I want for women, one of the things that I want so much for them is to stop apologizing for just existing. Right. And almost in that space, right? Like that is the confidence and the security and the self esteem. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also just really
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
to be coexisting, not codependent per se, but coexist with other people that are also wrestling with their confidence and security and their trauma. And right, like I keep trying to always like keep it clear of like, no, this
Mm-hmm.
is my trauma, this is how I'm showing up,
Definitely.
I'm just being triggered, right? Like, and my stuff is triggering yours. And so how do we
Mm-hmm.
not make it like you're loved or unloved versus, like I'm hearing that in the relationship with your son. The question was never,
Mm-hmm.
do you love me? Am I lovable? But just like, how do we improve communication? How do we
Mm-hmm.
improve our support of one another? How are we nurturing
Yeah.
love as opposed to tearing down? But you're starting loved, right? Like, or at least the goal is to start as individuals, be as loved as you can. And then you get to just be like, that's something that I say on here a lot, is that I want other people's acceptance to just be icing on the cake.
And that I would ask yourself,
Um,
where does that come from? Okay, maybe my relationship with my mom or my relationship with my dad or a sibling even. Like, did I,
mm,
and go and heal that part of your relation, like who you are, go heal that relationship and then come back and like parent from that place. I think that's really, I think
mm,
healing, and I said that earlier, that's what motivated me to deal. I was sexually abused by my biological dad, and I had so much insecurity, and I was picking really bad relationships and not getting the love and the attention that I needed. I never felt
yeah.
safe. I always felt like my nervous system was on high alert, and so I had to go heal all those parts of me, right? And so I think it's just being aware
Yeah.
of what happened to us, what is the healing that needs to take place. I had a lot of inner child healing that needed to really, I needed to grow in that. And so that's what motivated me to start working on my trauma and my childhood trauma was, okay, I want to be the healthiest person I can be in
Yeah.
life.
But sometimes it's so perfect, right? To just share out of our own weakness. But and I think being like, we don't have to be perfect people to help other people. Like we're all just a bunch of hot messes, right? Just trying to show up and
Yeah.
help each other out.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's just owning our weaknesses. Like, okay, this isn't going to be
Yeah.
perfect. And like you said, being
Mhm.
open with it. And then just being, going with it. I think we have to accept ourselves before other people will
Yeah.
accept us. I'll make a comment and my daughter's like, well, you got to love yourself
Yeah.
first. And I'm like, that's very true because that's what I taught them. Like, and self love is not selfish. It's not like it's a great character to have. Because we teach people like your cup needs to be full to go help other people, and that to me is what self love is. It's
Yeah.
what do I need to do to feel safe, to feel full, to feel that growth and that independence that we need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if we're healthy, if we've done the healing, we're not going to be drawn to be
Yeah.
codependent for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so I hear in that, right, of even just being able to be, if we lower the significance and the need for a label, and to also put on a lot of patience, like confidence in our communication and our confidence and security in ourselves, that being able to be patient then with the people around us, that it's a healthy enough of a relationship, right? We're not actually unsafe. It doesn't need to end. We're not trying to always decide, do I stay or do I go? But like, I'm staying right now. How do I stay in a healthy way? How
Mm-hmm.
do I show up for my spouse, for my kids when they're going through their stuff, and being
Yeah,
able to just stay
love
in
that.
it? So, well, any last thoughts that you have for us, or something you want to leave with someone who's listening today that might be really wrestling, just a word of
Yeah.
encouragement for
I
them?
think just let yourself be, like give yourself permission to be in the present moment. Um, be aware of how you talk to yourself and how you love yourself. I think that's really huge. Um, because we all need to be loved, and my one of my very basic needs is to feel safe. And so, asking myself, do I feel safe? Am I safe in this relationship? Do I feel safe as a mom? Do I
Yeah.
have things that I'm feeling that I need to talk about? And realizing that self-love is not selfish.
Mm.
I know people ask me all the time, what would you do in this situation? And one of my best friends is her husband has cancer and he's not doing well. And they're like, what do you say to her? And I go, I just sit with her. Like, I don't have any words to say. My heart is just palpitating so
Yeah.
fast for her. Like, I feel for her. It's just communicating that to her. But I just sit with her and I hold her hand, or I just want to be with her in her presence. And so I don't always have the words to say. And sometimes we don't need to talk. Like, we just need to be still. We need to sit in silence with people, whether it's our husband or our children or our best friends. I know I'll meet once a month with my best girlfriend, and we literally have to pick restaurants where we're
That's
served
fun.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner because we will be there all day with each other.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's always my favorite day of the month. And so I love having that time
Yeah.
just to be able to connect and to talk and just
Yeah.
to sit. And she'll always ask me, "What do you want to do?" And I go, "I just want to sit and stare at you,
Yes. I
like
love that.
like I'm fine. I'm happy just being with
Yeah.
you." So sometimes we need that for our relationships, I think. So just be yourself, work on you. If you
Mm.
have trauma, heal. I think healing is I always say the family unit is the core unit of society. And if our family units were healthier, I think we'd have a healthier society, in all honesty. So just
Yeah.
heal and grow and accept who you are, be who you are, be your most genuine, authentic
Yeah.
self. I love teaching authenticity to my clients
Yeah.
because I want them to be the best version of them
Yes.
that they can
I love
be.
Yes, I love it. Well, Debbie, thanks so much for helping us break down some codependency. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to write in. We're both available.
Definitely. Go check out my website. My website has some articles on healing and like just different topics. I think that healing holistically is the best way. And so that's where I teach my 8 elements of wellness.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
It was a joy, Kylie. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.